Today, the pulling of Jimmy Kimmel's show draws criticism from both sides of the political aisle. Nvidia's $5 billion investment in Intel gives the struggling company a lifeline. RFK Jr.'s vaccine panel recommends a change to the children's schedules. And protesters in France call for an end to austerity measures. It's Friday, September 19th. This is Reuters World News, bringing you everything you need to know from the front lines in 10 minutes, 7 days a week. I'm Tara Oakes in Liverpool. US President Donald Trump has celebrated the suspension of talk show host Jimmy Kimmel from the airwaves. And, speaking to reporters on Air Force One after his visit to Britain, said TV broadcasters should lose their licenses over negative coverage of his administration.
They give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away.
Trump earlier said Kimmel's late-night show was pulled off the air as a consequence of bad ratings, not a violation of the First Amendment. ABC's decision to pull the show has added fuel to a national debate over free speech. Our reporter Dawn Chmielewski says it's generated some criticism from people you might not think of as supporters of a late-night host.
So it's gotten a range of really interesting responses. The people who have stepped forward are perhaps not those who you think of as natural allies. Conservative commentators like Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, and Barry Weiss have all stepped forward in defense of the First Amendment. Ben Shapiro actually had some really thoughtful remarks about this. He said, look, the FCC has muddied the waters here by threatening to revoke the license of a television station for airing programming that it finds objectionable. That opens the door to political opponents eventually retaliating against conservative commentators at some point in the future. He said, this sort of cuts both ways. And this is a sort of theme that reverberated among conservative commentators who saw the potential harms of this down the road.
U.S. opposition to this resolution will come as no surprise. It fails to condemn Hamas or recognize Israel's right to defend itself, and it
U.S. diplomat Morgan Ortagus vetoing a draft UN Security Council resolution for a Gaza ceasefire, a lifting of restrictions on aid into the enclave, and the release of all Israeli hostages. It's the sixth time the US has cast a veto during the nearly 2-year war. And in Gaza City, Israeli forces control the eastern suburbs, and they've been pounding areas from where they could advance on central and western Gaza City, where most of the population is sheltering. Phone and internet lines were cut off for several hours across most of the Gaza Strip yesterday, signalling a potential escalation in ground operations. Now to a surprising development in the tech industry. Nvidia is throwing its weight behind Intel and investing $5 billion in the struggling chipmaker. The news comes just weeks after the US government took a 10% stake in Intel, a rare move to help shore up America's tech sector. Tech reporter Stephen Nellis says the deal gives Intel a shot at relevance in the AI race.
I think the initial reaction here is to think that Intel is getting more here because, let's be honest, the company does need capital. And Intel is also getting to ride on the success of Nvidia in the AI markets. But I think it's important to remember that Nvidia is getting something out of this too. They've made stabs at making the same category of central processor that Intel has made, and they've hit some real limit. They have not conquered all of the business-to-business markets and government computing markets that they probably could, in part because Intel still dominates there. So while on the one hand, it's tempting to think that Intel is getting everything out of this deal, and it's helpful to remember that even in its diminished state as of late, Intel still has this huge software ecosystem and customer base that Nvidia has been struggling to crack and is now going to get access to with some interesting combined products.
Stephen says the deal signifies that big companies are still vulnerable as some of their crucial parts are made outside the US.
What Intel really needs to straighten out its business is a big customer like Nvidia to come and ask Intel to manufacture its chips in Intel's factories. This deal does not do that, but it is a very close collaboration that a lot of analysts are reading as a potential first step closer to it. So it may take a few more years, but it's certainly encouraging movement toward that end goal for Intel.
President Trump is asking the Supreme Court to let him fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, despite a lower court's decision to block the move. Trump claims Cook committed mortgage fraud before taking office, which Cook denies. The lower court judge has ruled that those claims aren't sufficient grounds for removal under the law that created the Fed. A CDC panel has voted to change recommendations on childhood vaccination schedules. It's recommending splitting a single vaccine for mumps, measles, rubella, and varicella, also known as chickenpox, into 2 shots. The votes are the first from Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s 12-member advisory committee on immunization practices, and come as he's moving to remake US vaccine policy. Our global health and pharma editor in New York, Michelle Gershberg, explains.
The U.S. vaccine advisors have recommended that parents should only be offered 2 shots, one that combines measles, mumps, and rubella, and then the second one for chickenpox. The other thing that they voted on was whether or not the hepatitis B vaccine, which is currently recommended for newborns, should be delayed until an infant has reached the age of 1 month. However, for reasons that they did not fully explain, they are planning to take a new vote on the hepatitis B vaccine later today.
Public health experts say the change in recommendation could have a significant impact if approved.
That will have impacts in terms of insurance coverage. We still have to figure that out completely. And that will have impact on what families are being told when they bring their child in for immunization. It is already possible to choose to split this up into 2 vaccines, and many families do that. But for families who would prefer to have fewer trips to the pediatrician's office, and the concern is that that means it will not be available to them.
Hundreds of thousands joining anti-austerity protests across France. Teachers, train drivers, pharmacists, and hospital staff were among those who went on strike, while teenagers blocked dozens of high schools for hours. Protesters were urging President Emmanuel Macron to scrap looming budget cuts. Airbus Helicopters worker Brigitte Delou says workers are fed up with austerity. Unions are calling for more spending on public services, higher taxes on the wealthy, and for the reversal of an unpopular change making people work longer to get a pension. In France's southern port city of Marseille, thousands marched singing anti-fascist anthem Bella Ciao and holding placards calling to tax the rich. In Paris, police threw tear gas to disperse some protesters dressed in black who hurled beer cans and stones at them. But the Interior Minister said that the level of violence was not as high as initially feared. And it's Friday, so we'll close the pod with a recommended listen for you. It's tomorrow's episode of our long-form On Assignment podcast, looking back at 10 years since then Chancellor Angela Merkel said Germany could handle a large influx of migrants, and how migration policy has changed in Europe since. You'll be able to catch that episode tomorrow wherever you get your podcasts. For more on any of the stories from today, check out Reuters.com or the Reuters app. Don't forget to follow us on your favourite podcast player, and if you're listening on a smart speaker, just ask for the latest news from Reuters, 7 days a week. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily headline show.